Yeah, now it's recording. So, welcome everyone to this masterclass, Reimagining the Business in Yorkshire using the Circular Economy, delivered by Chidubem Nwabufo in partnership with York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership and Circular Yorkshire, hosted by Erin Wheeler, the Circular Economy Officer of the York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership. And I will just hand over now to Erin to introduce our speaker. And may I say, I will also repeat that at the end. Thank you so much, Chidubem and Erin, for taking the time to be with us today here. And we're looking so forward to this masterclass today. So I will go quiet and I will see you again at the end of this masterclass. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolos. Lovely introduction as always. As Carolos said, my name is Erin, and I'm the Circular Economy Officer for York and North Yorkshire LEP. We're a government organisation. There's one of us for each region in the UK, in England rather, and York and North Yorkshire is one of the only LEPs to have a dedicated circular economy strategy, which is my responsibility to sort of look after and try and drive within the local area through our Circular Yorkshire campaign as well. So Chidubem and I have worked together on a couple of different projects around circular economy, and she's incredibly knowledgeable. So I'm very excited to sort of like hand over to her, and so that she can tell us all about sort of using the circular economy for Yorkshire businesses. So Chidubem, over to you.
Okay, I feel like that is a bit of an oversell. I can't promise that I'm very knowledgeable. So hello everyone, my name is Chidubem. As Aaron kind of mentioned, I am the Circular Economy Manager for West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And today, of course, as the title kind of says, it's all around, I want to talk to you all around kind of reimagining business in Yorkshire using the circular economy. So I guess the caveat, I've just had my COVID vaccine and I do not feel 100% great. So this could go either way, but I hope you would bear with me as I kind of work through it. So my plan for today is basically set out the context. So why are we talking about the circular economy and where does it fit into some of the conversations that we're having at the moment around decarbonisation and climate action. Also talk about what the circular economy is, so kind of give you a few case studies, focused especially in Yorkshire, see what's already happening within the region, and then talk to you about Rebiz, so the program that I help manage, or the circular economy aspect of the program I help manage, and then we hopefully can have some time to have questions and discussions. So before I actually get started, I think it's important to kind of give you a little bit of, I guess, background on the Combined Authority. So we work in partnership with local councils and businesses to ensure that everyone in the region, and by the region I mean the Leeds City region, which includes York, that everyone in the region basically can benefit from a successful economy. So we work with around two billion pounds, basically looking at investment for better transport, housing, protecting the environment, etc. And part of our goal is basically helping to grow businesses and create skilled jobs within the region. So that's kind of the context within which the work that we do around the Resource Efficient Business Program kind of sits within. So I'm going to do a little bit of an interactive thing here. So if people could please use the chat, I'll give a minute. So these are some of the words that we probably have heard over the last year that have to do with climate action or sustainability. Could you just use the chat to share any additional ones that you can think of that you basically heard in the last year? I'll give maybe a minute or 30 seconds if people want to be interactive. Do not leave me hanging, please. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if people are putting in little bits, but I'm hoping that you guys are kind of interacting and sharing any additional kind of, I guess, words or phrases that you've heard. Oh, I see Susie put in biodiversity. Anyone else want to chip in?
See the chat, I can feed back any.
Oh, that'd be helpful. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.
No problem. I will monitor the chat. So if you want to put some things in the chat, then that'd be great.
Perfect. So, okay, I shall basically move on. So in essence, we have a multitude of different words that are used to basically talk around sustainability, circular economy, climate action. We have net zero, and these all kind of relate to protecting the environment and ensuring that, I guess, communities are kept as safe as possible. So they all technically fall under the concept of sustainability. So within the last year, we've not just seen, I guess, the new words kind of come to play. We've also seen different kind of industries take action and start to create some kind of change. So I pulled together some examples of how the fashion industry has basically started to respond to conversations around climate and sustainability. So we have Caring Group, who've been doing a lot of work in this space. We have kind of the move to zero. We have, of course, the work that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been doing with their jeans redesign, which is very much focused on the circular economy, and we have M&S, etc. So there's a lot of kind of change afoot. So I wanted to basically talk about what's actually driving this change. So from some of the work that we've been doing, we found that there's actually tends to be 3 drivers for change at the moment. These are legislation, public awareness, which is kind of growing around sustainability and the climate emergency, and then also climate resilience. And I'll kind of talk in a little bit more detail around these as well. So I'm never really sure which one to talk about first, whether to talk about public awareness or legislation in terms of what influences what. But I think for the purpose of today, basically just talk a little bit about the growing public awareness of climate emergency and climate action. So some research has kind of been done by RAP and many others who basically started to understand how the public are interfacing with climate change and climate action. So about 80% of the UK public actually believe we're in a climate emergency and urgent action needs to be taken. So that's about 70%. And then also customers are beginning to ditch brands because they don't necessarily align with their values around sustainability, mainly around the environment, but also from a social context as well. And then also, of course, we have legislation, and legislation is kind of always tends to be highlighted as one of the most effective ways to create change. But also governmental guidance and kind of voluntary agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol, the MDGs, so the Millennial Development Goals, and the SDGs have actually been found to help move the needle because they pretty much create a signal of what's to come. So some research has been conducted where they found that although the Kyoto Protocol, where about 37 industrialized countries committed to reduce their carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions by 5%, even though it received mixed reviews when it concluded in 2012, it actually laid the foundation for more ambitious targets to be set in the Paris Agreement, so COP21. Similar thing can basically be said about the MDGs, so they kind of moved the dial, even though some of the targets were missed as well. So basically they set the grounding, so the MDGs set the grounding for the Sustainable Development Goals. This is important, especially today with kind of legislation and governmental guidance, because countries and governments around the world are basically increasingly highlighting their commitment to tackling climate change and other environmental issues. In 2020, China, which is kind of the biggest manufacturer, highlighted their ambition to be net zero by 2060. So commitments of this sort basically just give a signal to industry and make industry want to be ahead of the game to get competitive advantage. And of course, because industry and business activities account for about a quarter of the UK activities or emissions activities, it's important that businesses basically take action. And also we saw from that kind of information in terms of the feedback from research from RAP that customers are also demanding this and basically starting to have detrimental impacts on business in terms of the number of business that's being lost if they're not making change. So these are just some of the high level kind of legislation or governmental guidance that have come up in the last year and a bit. So of course we have the waste strategy that is basically looking at how we can minimize waste to landfill and reduce kind of carbon emission from our waste, and that sits quite well within the circular economy, and I'll kind of come onto that in a moment. So another reason that businesses are actually basically starting to take action is climate resilience. So this is the RLC, and this is probably one of the a really great example used primarily in the fashion industry to highlight our impact, our potential impact. And in essence, this is the RLC in 2003, where we see a little bit of water in that space is already kind of being depleted because that was being used to water, like the source was being diverted to water cotton plants. And by 2018, we can see kind of the degradation that has kind of gone on in that space. So businesses are becoming increasingly aware of the fact that if we continue to utilize resources in a way that's not necessarily super responsible, that they could actually lose access to the raw materials that they need to actually do business efficiently. So there's a lot of conversation around how do we safeguard business activities as a result of what's going to be happening when it comes to climate change. So, and how does this kind of all fit in with the circular economy and the conversation we're going to have today? So in essence, the conversations happening at the moment are very much around climate emergency and addressing our impact on the environment, but also our social impact. And that usually fall under the banner of decarbonization, so reducing the amount of carbon we emit into the atmosphere. So BEIS have done some research and identified that circular economy actually provides an opportunity to help not just the UK, but globally to reduce our carbon impact. So what is the circular economy? I've talked a lot about kind of the context before getting to this point, because I think it's really important for businesses to understand why they should even be having the conversation in the first place, because if they don't really understand why it's important to be addressing some of the environmental issues or the environmental impact that they might be having, then explaining what the circular economy is to them could kind of present some challenges. So at the moment, we have a system where we have what is often referred to as a take, make, dispose model. Ooh, 1 second. Don't know what's happening with my mouse. So we have a take, make, dispose. Oh. So we have a take, make, dispose model where if I use a smartphone as the example, we will mine the metals that we use to kind of make a smartphone, assemble it together. Apple, Samsung, Sony, whoever you use will basically sell it onto you. You use it, and at the end of life or the end of its life within your life, you basically have a multitude of options where you might put it in a cupboard because you think you're going to use it again, or you might basically chuck it out, or you might kind of sell it on Mazuma if you're in the know. What we're trying to get to within a circular system is basically to ensure that we reduce waste, and every single phone or every single product that's made is returned back to the manufacturer in some capacity so they can disassemble it and utilize it for the production of other kind of resources, or in essence minimizing waste from the design process. So the concept of the circular economy is all around providing avenues for industry or businesses or companies, whatever you want to call it, to basically reduce waste and keep resources in use for as long as possible, so we're not necessarily relying so much on virgin finite materials. So there are many, I guess, applications of the circular economy, and there tends to be kind of 5 talked about quite a bit. So we have circular supplies, which is all around ensuring that we have renewable, recyclable, and recycled content included in the making of a product. We have resource recovery, which is all around taking back a product at its end of life and utilizing another capacity. And I'll show some examples of this as we kind of go through. We also have product life extension, which is all around making sure that products can be kept in use for as long as possible. So within a fashion context, for example, that would be thinking about reusing an item, so donating to a charity shop so someone else can go and buy it and then use it, or swapping with your friends in that capacity. We also have product as a service, which is all around providing access to a product to a customer for a specific amount of time where they can use it as a product, but it's actually a service. So I'll show some examples of this because we have things like mud jeans available where you can rent jeans, have access to them for like months, send them back, they're repaired and sent off to someone else. And then we have share platforms, which basically just enable increased utilizations of different products. So if we're thinking about a drill, for example, I had a really interesting fact the other day, or anecdotal fact the other day, where the average amount of time the drill is used is about 12 minutes. So instead of having each household having a drill, if there was a library where you could go borrow a drill when you needed it and basically take it back, so someone else has access to that. That's the concept of the sharing platforms. But rather than talk to you about kind of the cycle economy in theory, I thought I'd share a couple of examples, and then these will kind of filter down into what's happening in Yorkshire at the moment. So we have HP. They have a system where they have a subscription service where when you buy a printer, you can sign on to basically get ink as and when you need it, and you send them back your old cartridges and they recycle it and repurpose it. So one of the things that's really interesting about this concept is that from an environmental perspective, it's helpful in that they're able to kind of collect the post-consumer waste in terms of those cartridges, but also what they're able to do and what kind of allows it to make business sense for them to continue to provide this service is that they are able to basically extend the interaction with their customers post-purchase. So a lot of the times we will hear stories of, or we would, I guess, in our everyday life, see that you go in, you buy a printer, and then when it comes time to change your ink, you're just kind of scrambling for anywhere or anyone who has ink that fits your printer. So in essence, what they're able to do is retain that customer relationship because you're getting their ink directly from them. So they have a really good understanding of, how is your machine performing? What are you tending to kind of use their services for? And they can basically start to preempt what their next product or service could possibly be, while kind of reducing waste, but also reducing costs for the customer. So we have Sensvik, and they are a Swedish kind of engineering company. And what they decided to do was to start buying back their equipment. So this is resource recovery, where at the end of life within their customers' plants, they'll go in, decommission it, and basically take away the materials that tend to include quite a high alloy steel and recycle that and use component parts of that in their new products. What this helps them do is basically control the material supply. So in essence, their customers' waste then become their resource, helps them reduce kind of raw material costs, helps them retain customers over the long term. Because again, if you have a plan or in your contract to include decommissioning at the end of life where you can basically take back, then you can basically maintain that relationship and have an understanding of, okay, what is coming next for this customer? Are they going to be setting up a new plant with new equipment? How can we basically support them? So there's definitely a strong business case for continuing to interact post that initial transaction. And of course, there are a lot of environmental benefits in that new steel doesn't necessarily need to be produced for the new equipment that they're going to be making. And so I mentioned this already, kind of mud jeans. So basically, they basically make jeans. They sell them on to their customer, or they lease it to their customer, and the customer has access to that. And I've just realized that this slide is wrong. But in essence, what they do is you get access to the jeans. You can use them for a couple of months, however long you need it to be. But because of the makeup of the jeans or the way they're made, the company is able to repair them and refurbish them so that those jeans that you've utilized for months can be recirculated into the system. So within Yorkshire, so what are some of the examples of circular economy within Yorkshire? So we have Clerical. They're a beauty brand, and what they do is they basically make a product line using waste skins from British blackcurrants. So when juices are made, they basically take away the skins and utilize kind of chemistry and extract elements of that can then basically go into making a serum, which is what you see on your right or left, depending on what side you're looking at it from. So in essence, what this has been able to provide them with is basically additional revenue. So they have a new product line that they can provide directly to customers, in addition to kind of the work that they do with developing kind of products for wholesale and other customers. They provide proof of concept to their customers, and that show them that actually you can utilize waste in creating a high value product into the market. And then they also help reduce the amount of food waste that goes potentially to landfill, because they're taking waste from another industry and applying it to their sector. So we have a company called Canvasman as well, and they actually, so the next three are basically on our program at the moment. So they're a Bradford-based business, and they basically design and manufacture custom-made outdoor coverings. And what they do is they offer a repair service as well, because they basically have a guarantee or for their customers that if something breaks, we'll come, we'll repair it, we'll look at it. And what that does is generates additional revenue again for them, but also helps them to understand how their products are performing in the real world, which is really valuable data to basically be collecting, especially as a small business. They're also able to kind of retain their customers long term because they have that relationship that's built off the fact that they help them maintain their products, and then they also have a good understanding of, what is our customer going on to next. So are they going to get a new boat? What is that going to look like, and how can we support them to basically make that happen? And then of course they reduce the amount of waste that goes to landfill, because their customers don't necessarily need to always be changing the coverings, but they can get them repaired where appropriate. So we have Tech Buyer. So they're another kind of Yorkshire-based business. They basically are like the kings of refurbishing IT equipment, and their business kind of been growing quite well over the last few years. What they do is they basically help. They take used computers or used IT equipment, refurbish it, kind of clean the data, it refurbishes and provide it to kind of customers that are interested in refurbished IT. Through this business, their business is completely circular. Through their business, they're basically able to reduce the cost for their customer, also reduce the amount of electronic waste that goes to landfill, and of course, generate revenue from waste. And I've got a little video. I don't know if it's going to actually play. Yeah, it's not working. So maybe I'll skip that. And I'll basically put a link into that video where they're basically talking about how their business operates. Perfect. And another York-based one, because I had to, of course, given the fact that we're talking about Uni of York, I had to include a York example. So this is a company called Bumble Wrap, and they are on a mission to basically reduce our reliance on single-use plastic. And the company has basically developed a reusable food wrap using kind of cotton and beeswax in a similar way that basically their wrap operates in a similar way that cling film would. And these are the wraps. Here, the images of the wraps. And what they're currently doing is, of course, they have a inherently kind of circular option in that their product enables reuse. But what they're trying to do is actually go a step further. So we're working with them at the moment because they are trying to offer the opportunity for their wraps to be refreshed by their customers. And so we're basically looking at how we can basically scale that at the moment. So what they're able to do right now is that they provide their customers with kind of refills of the wax that they can basically use at home to recover the cloth to ensure that they can be used again for another year. They can also, through that process and the benefits for them as a business, again, retaining that kind of engagement with the customer post-purchase, but also kind of understanding, again, what next, what's kind of happening next, and then reducing plastic waste from the consumer side of things. So you've all through those examples have kind of tried to highlight some of the internal benefits for business for engaging with the circular economy. So of course, there's the financial savings. By minimizing waste, you kind of reduce the cost of disposal. So if you can cut down how much waste you have to get rid of or send to landfill, you reduce your landfill tax, you reduce your uplift tax, your uplift kind of cost, and also your general kind of waste consumption or cost alongside that. There's of course the environmental savings. If you're kind of reusing products, then you're avoiding the creation of new virgin materials. The big one that I think oftentimes gets people's attention, because sometimes when you think about the circular economy, you're thinking about it from a very environmental perspective, and how does this add on to the conversations around decarbonization or climate action, is that there is a big opportunity to kind of build really strong customer relationships, because you can basically innovate utilizing the data that your customers give to you on how your product or your service is doing in the real world, and basically make modifications to your business. And I think this is something that for small businesses is increasingly becoming important, given obviously the context of everything that's happening at the moment in terms of this COVID recovery, as well as everything that's kind of happening in terms of the fallout of the UK exiting the EU. There's also, of course, the opportunity to kind of gain a competitive advantage, because as we have kind of said at the top of the presentation, there is a lot of talk and shift from especially big business. So I think about 40% of the FTSE 100 companies have signed on to the EU, the UN's race to zero commitment, where they're basically everyone is trying to get to net zero. So a lot of the bigger customers or bigger brands who are SMEs customers are basically applying pressure to them to do more in terms of kind of that climate agenda. So by utilizing the cycle economy, there is an opportunity that businesses can pretty much gain competitive advantage and gain market share, and while their competitors basically get stuff together. Of course, there's kind of climate resilience by reducing their reliance on virgin materials that are finite. Businesses can basically start to fine tune the supply chain and reduce kind of the potential impact of any climate related impacts on some of their raw materials. And of course, there are national benefits of the circular economy. So RAP, as part of the Build Back Better kind of research, found that there's an opportunity to kind of utilize the circular economy to reduce unemployment and create about 500,000 new jobs in the UK. Of course, there is the environmental kind of impact on our economy and reducing as a whole the UK's impact from a greenhouse gas perspective. But also, of course, we know that the UK government has ambitions to be net zero by 2050. So that kind of all adds into some of those conversations and basically starts to, as businesses start to change, because they contribute about a quarter of emissions, any reductions that they have collectively will also have impacts in terms of UK emissions overall. And one of the other things is around supply chain. So one of the big things that happened post or in the middle of COVID was that we found that a lot of the supply chains that we had were actually quite fragile. So by creating systems where maybe one business's waste could be someone else's resources locally, there is an opportunity to kind of create a more agile and stronger supply chain. But of course, we can talk about all the benefits all day, but we have to mention some of the challenges for SMEs specifically. So at the moment, we know that a lot of the big businesses are setting these very ambitious targets, but they tend to have quite a big team of sustainability experts at their disposal or within the company. The same isn't necessarily true for SMEs, so they struggle oftentimes with kind of limited resources and expertise, lack of finance, also kind of juggling the economy and other priorities. So if we're just thinking about the pandemic, as an example, everyone is trying to survive at the moment and not necessarily thinking about what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years' time. And then, of course, there's scale. So SMEs tend to be kind of smaller. So they don't necessarily always have access to economies of scale that maybe a big business would to be able to procure completely circular options, or to basically be able to procure specific types of maybe, I don't know, waste management as an example. So this is kind of where we come in. So the Resource Efficient Business Program is kind of all around bridging that gap of, the lack of expertise, as well as in some cases kind of funding. So we provide advice and support to SMEs that are looking to become more resource efficient and environmentally minded in the way they do business. And the way we do this is by providing them with up to 30 days of free consulting support. And the simple process is we have a meeting, or they have a meeting with me, and we kind of talk about some of the challenges, what the vision is for the future, trying to get a feel for where they kind of want to go. Because one of the key things for us that's really important in having the conversation, especially now with everything that's kind of going on, is ensuring that circular economy is seen as a solution or provides a solution to a small business, as opposed to be seen as something else to be doing, to be perceived to be environmentally friendly. So we kind of come from it from an angle of, here's how the circular economy can help you solve this challenge you're having. Here's how the circular economy can help you achieve this goal you're having. And that's kind of the approach that we take. And then once that's done, they kind of go through a couple of checks to make sure they're eligible for support. And then we have a diagnostic. So that's 2 days initially of support where we look at the full business operation and start to identify specific areas where circular economy could work really well, and then start to narrow that down. So by the time they get to stage 2, it's kind of a deeper dive, and maybe we've selected about 2 or 3 options for how they can move circularity forward. And then stage 3 is kind of the holy grail. That's where everyone wants to be, and that's up to 25 days of support. And that can cover everything from, if we identify a circular model that would work for the business, designing it operationally, looking at the financials. So what financial implications does this have? And how could that kind of be put into action? So at the end of the support, we have each business has a bespoke action plan created that's quite high level, that provides them with key action that needs to be taken and kind of either funding opportunities or contacts that they need to get in touch with to kind of help them to move that along. So it's quite an in-depth approach to basically providing solutions in a similar way. There are obviously projects similar to this running at the moment in Scotland as well as London. So it's kind of, it's been seen by businesses from what we're hearing as super useful in terms of bridging that gap, especially the knowledge gap. So in order to participate, the business just has to be an SME status. They have to be B2B, although there are some like flexibilities in terms of B2B versus B2C. So if they're split B2B, B2C, and they're wanting to grow their B2B aspect, we might be able to support them. They also have to have received less than 200,000 in state aid, and they have to be within the relevant sectors. So the only sectors that we don't actually kind of engage with are primary agriculture, banking and financial services, and activities related to social care and education. And we cover both West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire, including York. So to kind of give you a flavor of the type of projects that we're working on at the moment, so it's kind of a mixed bag. We have everyone from bedding manufacturers to food companies to construction. There's really a big appetite for kind of circular economy and sustainability at the moment. And then in interest of time, because I think I'm running out of time a little bit, it's basically, I wanted to give you a little bit of a case study. So we have a company at the moment on our program called Vanilla Etc., and they supply vanilla pods and make extracts and powder and paste for kind of a variety of customers, including like bakeries and restaurants and stuff. And the business had an interest in circular economy because of their customer demand. So their customers were already asking the question of, what's the environmental impact of your operation? And they see it as a way to remain competitive. So through Rebase, we are able to provide them with a full review of their manufacturing process, and then identified opportunities to embed circular economy into their business. One way of this was kind of embedding better filtration systems. So I don't know if anyone knows this, but when you're making vanilla, there tends to be like vanilla seeds that are actually valuable in terms of the little seeds are put into ice cream for mostly for like aesthetic purposes, but they're tiny, and so you have to get the right filtration system in place to enable you to extract the maximum amount of seeds. And we found that like there tended to be kind of release of those seeds into the water system. They have no kind of environmental impact, but they were kind of a lost revenue in that the company had to then be buying new seeds to kind of replace those that were lost. So off the back of stage 1, which was kind of surprising to us, they have basically put in a new filtration system that's being tested at the moment. And they're looking to introduce other ways to reduce waste as well as cost, and looking at alternative kind of packaging, because of course plastic is a big conversation at the moment. So I wanted to kind of give a very quick kind of overview, because I know there are quite a few people who are public sector that are on the line in terms of the approach. So if you're thinking about embedding circular economy into your company, what are some of the ways that would be useful to kind of do it? So at the moment we have 3 kind of approaches. So we have capacity building, which is all around building knowledge in-house, because we know that the conversation of the circular economy, or the term circular economy, can be relatively new to different kind of people. So it's more around making sure that you meet everyone, or you make sure that everyone's on an even playing field. So you can have training sessions or workshops with your key partners, and also try to understand who already has existing relationships, who's already doing stuff within the circular economy, and how can you build capacity to basically elevate that, whether you're looking to do it for business reasons, or whether you're looking to do it from kind of a public sector or kind of a student perspective. There's also, of course, direct engagement. So basically talking around the things that are really important to businesses. So talking about how can they build resilient supply chains? How can they innovate, especially in relation to data? This is an area that I'm a little bit obsessed with, and I haven't talked enough about today, but there is a big opportunity to utilize data that we get access to through the circular economy to basically continuously improve business operations over time. And then also there are things like making sure that you collaborate. So at the moment we're working with Kirklees Council to start a business park project to basically look at how we can embed like a place-based approach to circular economy. And of course, marketing. So it's really important to kind of create case studies and show people how the work that you're doing is kind of impacting the local community, or what the benefits would be from an environmental or social perspective, whatever angle you kind of want to take. And to kind of cap it off, we have 4 priority sectors at the moment, and these are all based very much aligned with our economic strategy. And the reason that we kind of wanted to approach it from that perspective, again, is because we understand that businesses are, although they're of course interested or invested in environmental improvements, they also are very much interested in making sure that their business continues to thrive. So basically focusing on the areas where our economic development team is also kind of aligned with. And I was going to share a little slide on kind of opportunities for students, but we can always maybe pick that up in the Q&A. I will end there if that's all right. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to kind of, my email's here. Feel free to email me, or feel free to ask them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chidubem. That was a really good presentation. And I think what you did that was really interesting, sort of like all the different examples of how circular economy can be used. Like, I think that's the real strength of it, is that sort of every business can participate in different ways. Do you have sort of like a favorite example that you've come across in your time of working in the circular economy?
That's a good question. Favorite, like a favorite. Well, because I like to say I'm a fashion girl. I'm very biased to kind of, I guess, circular opportunities within the fashion system. So I'd probably say, yeah, it's a hard one. That's really tricky. I'd probably say something around maybe fashion rental would probably be quite interesting. Even though it's very complicated in that, as much as it's seen as like, a really great option, there are also challenges around it, because research has found that people, especially, and that's been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, people are really concerned about hygiene and where did this come from, and all these kind of questions. So I think the complexity, or the human complexity of the circular economy within that rental system, especially for fashion, is really what like fascinates me about it. So the fact that it's not just like easy, where it's like, oh, you can rent a car. It's like, oh, you can rent clothes, but will I want to? So that's why I kind of like that. It's a complicated answer.
No, I mean, it's a really interesting answer, and like definitely something to bear in mind. I think like renting clothes is becoming more and more common, but there is always that thing of like, you can design a good system, but it's how you get people to kind of engage with that.
Exactly. Yeah, because one of the big things that's kind of really important for people to realize is that even if you create a business that's completely circular, if no one engages with it, then it's a waste, and you're kind of contributing to the same problem. So it's all around. So for us, the key thing when it comes to engaging with businesses and developing circular business models for them, or with them, really, it's kind of ensuring that the market is strong in that respect. So we're not just recommending that they make something that then is seen as waste, because that could be, that just adds to the problem, and it's part of the issue that we have at the moment.
Definitely. And you mentioned like sort of legislation being a really important tool. What we know that there is new legislation coming in, particularly around packaging. There's a new plastics packaging tax coming in, and things like extended producer responsibility and things. What do you think legislation kind of needs to do in order to be effective? Because we have seen environmental legislation before, possibly not on this scale, but it might touch the problem.
Oh, that's a big question. That's a really big question.
On the spot here.
That's a really big question. That's a big question. I think the main, I guess it would be kind of all around implementation and enforcement. So how from a business perspective, how is it implemented in terms of what kind of level of engagement do businesses have with the process? But then also, it's not just about, this is a law, it's also about this is a law and here's how we're enforcing it, and making sure that that kind of mandate is there. That would probably be the two things that maybe I would be willing to say at this moment off the top of my head. Don't hold me to that, because that could change.
I won't hold you to it. That's a really good sort of perspective. And we've got a couple of questions coming in. Sort of people are particularly interested in sort of where businesses kind of start with the circular economy, and this is something that I always come across in my work, is businesses going like, oh, it sounds really interesting, but I don't know where to start. And there are a couple of people saying sort of, where do businesses start with the circular economy?
Okay, so this is a good question. So I guess I could do the cheeky thing of just plugging our program, but I'm not going to do that, although our program is available if you're within the region. I think to start, it would probably be useful to do a bit of a mapping exercise with your team if you're a business owner. So try to understand. So the questions I tend to ask, what are kind of the key challenges that you're having? That's look at it quite broadly. What's your vision for the future? And then in terms of the mapping, start to understand what data is available for how you're performing from a waste perspective, from an energy perspective, from a water perspective. So you can pick different kind of angles that you want to potentially cover, but also think about what are the things that are really important to you as a business owner, and start from there, because that will kind of give you momentum to continue, because it's not always super easy a journey to kind of be on. But if you start with the kind of the challenges you're having, where you want to go, and then also what your key interests are. So am I interested in green energy? Am I interested in reducing my waste, etc.? Yeah, so I think that's kind of the approach I would take.
No, definitely. I think for me, the thing is being like businesses being open to other opportunities. So I think that's something I've seen a lot through circular economy work, with business coming in going, oh, we really need to look at, like, for example, our energy consumption, and then finding out that actually there's a more efficient way to use their packaging, or there's a waste stream that they just always assumed was just waste, and that they can bring that back into the business. So I think sort of flexibility and being open to new opportunities is really important for businesses as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think being open-minded is super important, because I know that it can be odd having someone who hasn't lived in your shoes basically telling you what you should do differently. But I think, yeah, just being open to the process is always helpful.
Definitely. And I've got a question sent to me via the chat around sort of like, why do sort of what reasons do businesses give for being involved in the circular economy? Are they the sort of the same ones that you highlighted, or do businesses have different reasons?
Oh, good question. I think they tend to be similar to kind of the ones I've highlighted, in that they want to gain competitive advantage. They see a trend coming. They see that sustainability or circular economy, or kind of the climate kind of conversation is going to get bigger, and they want to get ready for that. That's always a kind of a big one. Some businesses are actually just founded by people who are genuinely passionate about kind of the environment and want to do more. So they might have already started a business with kind of sustainability or circular economy embedded into the business, and they're always just kind of interested in seeing where next, like what's happening next, what next. So there's kind of a mixed bag, and then of course there's businesses who see it from a financial angle, where it's like we have a lot of waste, we're wasting a lot of money, we need to figure out what we need to do with this. So it's kind of mixed. It's a non-answer, but
no, it's a good answer. I think I've definitely seen a massive change in consumer culture, especially in the sort of like last 2 or 3 years, with consumers being much more concerned around what they're buying, where it's coming from, what impact it's having. And I think that's a really important tool that businesses can actually utilize to help them sort of grow.
I've just put something in the chat that I think I maybe should I kind of want to answer, I guess. Look at me taking the reins from you. Sorry, Aaron.
Going off with the hosting
here. So it was like something about, you mentioned something around opportunities for students. Could you elaborate on that? So in essence, I kind of was thinking about it from a perspective of what skills would be needed next, in terms of getting ready for the next generation of people who are joining the workforce. So I think it would be really interesting for people who are thinking about kind of joining the workforce to start thinking about, data skills. Also kind of thinking about, I guess, more, I want to say traditional business skills, but not really. So I think the data aspect, in terms of being able to analyze data, being able to kind of provide code, etc., being able to interpret big data, will be kind of increasingly important. And I think that's sometimes not an area that's connected, in that the data aspect and the circular economy aren't always interconnected. But I think data can definitely help the circular economy, and vice versa, kind of. So yeah, for, I guess, students, I'd be asking, or I'll be saying now, start thinking about, different ways that you can apply some of the skills that you have, from a data perspective as well, because I think that would be really valuable going forward.
Yeah, and I would say, in terms of sort of opportunities for students, they're reaching out to your LEPs and your growth hubs if you are doing something that's related to business or sustainability, and seeing what they've got on and seeing what they've got open can be really, really interesting. We've actually got a research project with a master's student, which I will quickly plug at the end. But it's a fantastic example of sort of like what can be achieved if you do sort of reach out and start that relationship.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, we might be looking for some support as well with our business project. So if anyone's interested in circular economy, or wanting to talk a little bit more about that, I'm always happy to kind of have a chat, because I think it is a complicated conversation to have in terms of skills requirements in, I don't know, 5 minutes.
Definitely, and we have got about 5 minutes left, so I am gonna start picking and choosing questions. So there was one that related to the initial sort of question that I had about sort of like where businesses start with circular economy.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is wanting to know that when a business is specifically about circular economy, so for example, you mentioned Caracol with the blackberry skins and things like that.
Mm.
Where do they start from? Have they got a waste product that they want to utilize within an existing supply chain, or a product they want to source with a reusable material? Do you see a lot of businesses that are starting out and intend to be green from the start? It's interesting, because there are what I would term like circular businesses, where they are doing this, and the circular economy is the core method through which they function.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are established businesses with circular economy practices, and those are two different almost arenas.
Yeah, so okay, so a waste product that they want to utilize, product they want to. Okay, so in terms of, I guess, is the question more around getting access to the waste, or is it,
I think
you already have the waste and you want to figure out what to do with it?
Yeah, I think it's more around, if you're intending to start a business that is fully circular, or is contributing to the circular economy, where would you start with that?
Ooh, okay, so that's a really good question. So the thing I tell every business, whether they're circular or not, is start with the market research. And that answer can vary depending on what you want to produce. So if you're making a product, it might be a situation where you actually create a minimum viable product, and you go to your potential customer and ask them, what do you think about this? And they give you feedback, and you collect that feedback over time, and you basically utilize that feedback to understand what the market opportunity is for you as a business. So I think that market research aspect is super, super, super important. And I always tell people, start with the market research, and it can be clunky, it can be weird, it can be kind of whatever. You just want to make sure that the market actually exists, as opposed to, I don't know, if you're thinking about skin cream, you make 10,000 bottles, and then you're like, oh guys, this is completely circular, and everyone's like, we don't care. So that's kind of the way I would play it. But also, I think having that minimum viable product is really important. And then just get it in the hands of people as quickly as you can, and then get that feedback, and then basically work on that feedback as you get it.
I think
hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. I think a fantastic example of that is, I always bring up the Cooper King Distillery, who spotted there was a sort of niche available for a carbon negative gin, and just went for it. But crucially noted that was a gap that could do with billing before they went for it.
Yeah. So I think that is super, super, like, I can't emphasize it enough, because it's just one of those things where, like, sometimes you speak to people and there isn't necessarily that understanding that the market research is really important, just from a purely business perspective, really.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we kind of have come to the end of the Q&A session. I'm aware there are other questions to be asked. So I think Chidubem and I can both put our email addresses in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to us. I'm always happy to have a chat with people over Zoom or by phone or email, however is helpful. I'm sure Chidubem is happy to extend.
Always happy to have a chat. I like Susie's question. She's like, how did you get your inspiring expertise? I would love to answer that, but we've run out of time. I can't gush on myself yet. But yeah, we can have a chat.
Very quick one, Chidubem. Yeah, if you have like 2 or 3 sentences, that would be great. Yeah, because I like this question too. Yeah.
I guess it was just, I don't know, like it's one of those questions that you just it just happened. So I was very interested in fashion, and I wanted to kind of study sustainability from a fashion perspective. And as part of doing that, as in my master's thesis at Imperial, I basically discovered the circular economy, and I have not let it go since then. And I've just kind of been working on it obviously from a fashion lens, which I'm sure you probably observed in the examples that I gave within the presentation. But then also that's expanded beyond in terms of understanding, okay, what could actually happen within, like, society in general from a CE perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chidubem, for your very insightful talk. You actually provide us with in very simple terms, what circular economy means in practice. And thank you so much, Erin, as well, for this very interesting discussion at the end. Thank you very much, both, and thank you everyone for your questions. I think, yes, we actually we don't have any more time. If we can just move to the next slide, please, Chidubem, so
yeah,
we can sum up, and also this one. So thank you, everyone. That was the last masterclass for this academic year. The next ones are coming, are already planned for the autumn 2021, and you can check them in this on this link. And again, I would like just once again to thank you. Thanks so much, both Chidubem and Erin, for taking the time to join us in this masterclass and providing this so interesting discussion about circular economy. So at this point, I would like just to stop the recording. And
I'd just like to quickly, sorry, Carol.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So stop the recording. Yeah.
So we do have a research opportunity currently through York and North Yorkshire Lab. It is covering the entirety of Yorkshire. Chidubem was talking earlier about opportunities for students, and we actually have, we're very lucky to have a master's student working with the low carbon and environment team with us in York and North Yorkshire Lab for the next couple of months. Her name is Natalie Phillips, and she's looking at circular economy practices and sustainability, particularly within the brewing industry. which is one of Yorkshire's sort of big industries. She's not limited specifically to North Yorkshire, she can look across Yorkshire, but she's really interested to sort of explore those supply chains, explore those processes, and she's equally interested to talk to breweries that are doing sustainability and who have not yet sort of started that journey. So if anyone is interested in sort of participating in that research or has a contact they'd like to introduce us to, my email is in the chat. Do feel free to drop me a line and we can introduce you to Natalie.
Excellent. Thanks, Erin, of course. Yeah, that's very good also to share with the rest of the people. So thank you everyone for attending this masterclass, and we'll see you in the autumn. And again, thank you very much, Chidubem and Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.